Hello, everyone. This is episode 29, and today we're going to be meeting up with our good friend Phoebe. She lives in France, and she's going to be sharing her travel evolution and some really fascinating travel stories. Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries and all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, Phoebe. It's so good to talk to you. We've known each other online for years.
Yeah, amazingly long time, actually. It's great to talk to you guys.
Yeah,
you too. I think one of the things that we've always known is that you have a real fascinating travel history and travel evolution, if you will. Why don't you give us a little idea about how you got into this wonderful world of travel?
Yeah, sure. I'm basically born into travel. Seriously, I moved country at 10 days old, which I don't think is even possible these days because of, you can't get a passport before 10 days
right
now. But I was born in Paris, and my dad was working for NATO at the time. And Charles de Gaulle kicked NATO out of France, and so it moved to Brussels. So basically, my mum stayed on until, I was born and they could get me a passport so that we could move to Brussels. It was all happening literally around my birth date. So we moved to Brussels, and basically, I'm back now in France. So I'm always saying, I'm born in Paris and all this, but it's absolutely not why I'm in France now. It's pure coincidence. I spent 10 days there. And of course, this made a headache for French bureaucracy in the beginning of my time being back here. But that's another story. So yeah, basically then from Brussels, we moved to the UK. Then we moved to New Delhi, where I lived from the age of 4 to 8 with my parents. My dad was by this stage working for the Foreign Office rather than NATO. NATO was a secondment. Mm. And so from Delhi, we went to Czechoslovakia, as it was in those days, because this was in the late 70s, early 80s, very much behind the Iron Curtain, very Cold War times. We were, you just can't even begin to imagine how different it is from nowadays. We were not allowed to associate with local Czech people. There was no tourism. I mean, literally, there was nobody there. Sorry.
We went rather early to Czech Republic before it converted back. So probably in 1990, late 80s, early 90, something like that. Before 91 anyway. And it was dismal.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt gray.
We went shortly after it had just reopened to the West. So they were getting some tourism in, not much yet, but yeah, everything was still pretty much unchanged from the communist times.
And you could walk across Charles Bridge and not touch anybody easily. Like there was nobody there. Nowadays that doesn't happen. It's just so crowded.
It's just crazy, the difference. I mean, back then, like I said, there was no tourism. The only foreigners were, a few NGOs and embassy staff. That was it. And we used to go to, funnily enough, this is one of the silly, crazy stories that when I first met you, is that we used to go shopping in Weiden.
That's right.
Where you lived, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Because there was no shopping. I mean, there was nothing to do. So we would do sort of R&R trips across the border to Weiden.
Well, that must have taken you a couple of hours each way.
I think with the border crossing and everything, it was probably more like 3, but you'd make a day of it, or even obviously stay overnight. But it was just amazing times. We used to, like you say, cross the Charles Bridge with nobody, and we'd go everywhere on our roller skates. I was a young teen, and I would literally just roller skate around Prague. And we were always followed. We always knew who the the spy was following us. We used to call them Boris, and they always wore a bright yellow tie. I mean, they weren't subtle. But we'd play them, Anyway, so it was such fascinating. It was such crazily different times. And from there, we went to Iceland, which, was way before Iceland became the popular destination that it is now. Back then, there were 4 hotels in Reykjavik. That's it.
That's
wow.
And by this stage, I was a late teenager. So I was 15 to 18. So the perfect age of sort of going out at night. But it was so safe. And, that my parents, I never had such a thing as a curfew. They never said you have to be home by, 10, 11, midnight, whatever. And also it was the age by which time Icelanders could speak fantastic English. So there, as opposed to Prague, I made great friends who I still have, Icelandic friends who, still, we've been to see them since we've been back there, and we've met up in Paris, and one of them's coming to stay in the Jeep this summer, fingers crossed. So that was amazing. Again, no tourism, the odd school trip for geography. And, but, Icelanders were, just so open and so easy to talk to, and such good friends that 35 years later, still really great friends. From Iceland, we then moved to, then I became an adult. So I went off and did my studies in Australia on my own, irrelevant of my parents, because my mum is Australian. So I wanted to go get to know her side of the family. Okay. And then I moved to Vietnam because I got a job with an NGO in Hanoi from 92 to 96. Again, no tourism. When I was first there, you had to apply for a permit to leave Hanoi city limits. Oh, wow. I was allowed in on a one-way visa. I can't even begin to imagine this now. My passport was taken off me, and I didn't have an exit visa.
Wow!
Oh, wow!
And I knew every single car in the city. Can you imagine? I mean, you've been to Hanoi, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. I have.
And
it is amazing to me to see how the traffic has changed. I agree that's one indication of how tourism can affect, or how time affects a city, because we've been places where there's no traffic at all. And now, like you said, Hanoi is an example. It's crazy traffic. So China was another place. First time I went to China, I have pictures of open roads in Beijing with no cars on it. You can't even imagine that now.
Yeah, I haven't been back to China since 96, so I can't imagine how it's, I went to Beijing twice in the mid-90s, because both times I was taking train trips, one time from Hanoi to Helsinki and one time from Beijing to Moscow, just the regular Trans-Siberian. But I haven't been back since then, so I'm sure it's changed so much.
So I got to imagine Hanoi traffic in the 90s, early 90s. Well, when we went not that long ago, in order to cross the street, we had this trick where we would find an elderly lady who was crossing the street, and we were just kind of following her shadow, because they would just walk across fearlessly and everybody would avoid them. So if you were in the shadow, then the traffic would just go around us too. I imagine you could just walk across the street, no problems back then.
I mean, you could. It's definitely easier than now, because we went back again in 2016. So I have seen it recently. But it was still crazy because there were just so many bicycles and motorbikes and cyclos. It was still packed, but obviously, nothing like nothing that could hit you as dangerously as a big car or a truck. But it still had that craziness of just, everyone just merging like that and sort of coming out the other end. And, nothing dangerous really. If you got hit by a motorbike, obviously you don't want to be, but it's not as bad as a taxi or a truck or whatever. Yeah. So basically after Vietnam's where I met my French husband. Okay. And when we left there, we both left at the end of contracts, and we both said, right, well, we'll whoever gets the first good job, we'll follow. The other follow. We weren't necessarily moving to France, But 20, how many years later? 25 years later, here we still are in France. It was never a conscious decision, but it was work related, and we've lived in France ever since Vietnam. But we have moved 8 times, and we've lived in 6 different departments, I think, départements, counties, whatever, from the very North Calais area through Paris, through now where we are in the south. Had 10 years in Paris, which was amazing and lovely, and I'll always love it. It's where my 2 kids were born. Never get sick of Paris, but at the same time, we were so delighted to move down here to the south. And basically, we've, ever since being in France, we've just done kind of regular travels, as I would call it. Nothing as, I mean, we've both been employed in jobs where we can only take, your standard 2 weeks holiday at a time, or, but having said that, we have 2 kids. Our oldest is 22, and we took him on his first trip abroad when he was 3 months, I think. So we have traveled with the kids ever since they were babies, never shied away from, taking them. But when I say traveled, we've never been to theme parks. We don't do kind of traditional family friendly stuff. We drag them around. We drag them around medieval cities. Make them
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. They've been to Krakow and all over Poland and places that you wouldn't really say are the most obvious kid destinations, but they love them all, and we just we continue to travel. We've taken them back to Vietnam, and we've had a few long haul travels with them, but mainly it's Europe and road trips, which I know you guys like.
That's what we love. But
in fact, one of our first road trips as a family was with our 3-month-old daughter, where we were living in Germany at the time. We just kind of threw everything into our little Volkswagen Polo and headed south one summer, and went through France and basically spent our time along the coast, southern France, and down into Spain, the Costa del Sol, Costa Brava, and then back up through Spain. It was a great 3.5 weeks. And, we survived with a 3-month-old baby. I think not only survived, but thrived.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. They're so easy at that age anyway. It's when they get really teenagers, it's harder.
I think it's funny because people with children who want to travel, they're always worried about taking a baby. Well, first of all, the babies are the easiest ones to travel with because you strap them on and off you go, But as I get older, maybe there's some other challenges. Ours, although I tell everybody, I think if they get used to it, really, you don't notice it. I mean, sure, are they going to have a meltdown every once in a while? Yeah, but the thing is, they're going to have a meltdown wherever they are, so it doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And people have kids all over the world, surprise, surprise. So they kind of know how kids are.
That's very, very true. Yeah. I guess it just, it's so ingrained in people like us, because you, Corinne, are also like a traveling kid, weren't you?
Travel,
so,
yeah.
It sort of, it doesn't even occur to me that there's any reason not to, it just, it's so natural to just travel with children, it's the same for me when some people find it really odd that I literally have no hometown. I have nowhere that means anything to me, that I don't have any roots. That's completely natural to me. It worries other people more than it worries me. Equally, it's just so natural to just put my kids in the car and off we go. And there's, when people say, oh, but don't they need entertainment? I remember someone asking me, oh, are there any parks? I can't remember where we'd been. Maybe Spain. No, might have been the Poland trip. Are there any parks there? And I said, oh yeah, plenty. Lots of nice nature. Places you can go and hike. And she went, no, theme parks. And I was like, oh gosh, honestly, don't know if there are any theme parks there. And for her to take a child had to be to a theme park. And so,
Wow.
different kind of travel. Like
Yep.
if you're going on a holiday with a kid, it has to be to a place with entertainment rather than
for the
just,
child. Yeah. We're not big theme park people either. However, my kids occasionally wanted to go to one. So once when we were in Australia, once when we were in Paris, actually, they were like, well, let's go to Paris Disney. Let's go to whatever Euro Disney. What is it called? Euro Disney or Paris Disney? I don't know.
Yeah.
Euro Disney.
One of those. And somewhere in Australia, there was a theme park too. And I'm like, we're not going to a theme park. But, we will drop you off. You can
they were old enough, so.
And we will pick you up. So that's how we covered that. And we only did it twice. I mean, it's not like they asked to do it all the time. Because we always
Well, they also went to Tokyo Disney, and it was the same type of things.
Yeah.
And they were teenagers, so, you want to go to Tokyo Disney?
Get on the train and
have fun.
Go on your own.
You got a train ticket, and you know how to do it. So off they went for the day.
I mean, when we were living in Paris, we started off in central Paris in the 4th arrondissement in the Marais, and then moved out to the burbs to have more space with kids, and those suburbs were out nearer Disneyland. And lots of my local friends actually had annual passes. And on Wednesdays in France, there's no school, or there's no school in the afternoon, but there's usually no school at all. And it's when you do your extracurricular activities. So kids, learn a musical instrument, or they do art classes, or they do their sport. And some of my friends there on Wednesdays went to Disney. That's what they did. And I was just, it kind of horrified me in all ways, but I did feel so sorry for my kids, because honestly, I was such a mean mum. All their friends were off at Disney, and they were being made to learn the piano and that sort of thing. Anyway, they have. I think my oldest has been about 3 times, but I only went once, and we've never paid. I went the one time when a friend who was working there got us free tickets. And I have to admit, once I was there, I could see just how much fun it was. I mean, of course it was fun.
Right.
But, totally delighted not to ever have to go again. It wasn't my thing.
That's how I am too. And now we have a grandchild. And I told my kids, I said, you guys want to go to Disney? My girls love Disney. I said, you want to go to Disney? That's fine. I'm going to be the grandma that stays home when you're tired with the baby, or this. But however old he is, you can bring him to me and I'll take him. You stay out all night. I don't care. I'm not going. It's just not me. Not at me at all. We one time, Erica, my youngest, one time we were in this town in Germany, and we were going for the day, and they have a beautiful cathedral. The town is Speyer. And we were going to the Jewish cemetery, and we were doing all these things. I had a little list, and Erica looks at me. She's 5, and she says, Mom, she says, are we going into a church? I said, I'm sure. No, she goes, are we going to a museum? And I said, well, I'm sure we'll go to a museum. We go to a museum every time we go out. Well, we didn't go to a museum that day. And Erica was 5. So at 5 o'clock, around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, we're about to head home. And she starts melting down. You said we'd go to a museum. I'm like, I'm so sorry. What 5-year-old has a fit about not going to a museum? I said, we'll go to one another day. So it's all what you get used to, I think. They loved going to those old cathedrals. They love going to, like you said, Roman ruins and old cities, and walking up and down cobblestone hills and alleyways. And I mean, that's what we love, right?
And you can make it so much fun. I remember at one stage, when we first moved here, my littlest was around 2, and we used to make paper planes and throw them around these little medieval villages so that he could kind of run and catch it. And it was his way of just, because age 2, he wasn't remotely interested in the cute village. But he had such a great time because he was just, chasing these paper planes. And we tried, obviously, to make sure they never actually went over a cliff and got lost. But, because it was a paper plane, apart from obviously the environmental issue of, not wanting to litter, if it did get lost, it wasn't, a favorite toy And even a ball, sometimes if you cook a ball and it gets lost, it's a problem. So we used to, the amount of paper planes we've thrown around medieval European villages.
That's a great idea.
And he loved it.
My grandson is almost 2. He'll be 2 in April, and airplanes are his favorite thing in the world. So I can see how that would be so worth it. He loves airplanes so much that if I just draw one on a piece of paper, he'll pretend to fly that, and it's flat.
I mean, it's like one dimensional.
He's a future traveler.
Yeah,
he definitely is. Unfortunately, as a pandemic baby, he would have been long traveled by now. But he's been stuck in the state. We have taken him on a couple of things around the state and stuff like that, and he's done beautifully. But nothing international yet, of course. So we'll see. So I remember you sent me a message about you said you had some good food stories. I always love a good food story. Do you remember what you were talking about when you said that?
Oh, look, one of my favorite has got to be when we were leaving Hanoi, our landlord invited us to a dinner in the evening at his place. And obviously it was quite a feast and a very special occasion. And he lived on Westlake, the big lake out in the northwest of Hanoi, the huge lake, the main lake, which I dare say nobody would eat the fish that they pull out of there now. But back then people did, even though it possibly was more polluted, I don't know. But people would eat stuff out of the lake. And so we had snails and we had shrimps and we had all sorts of things. And then came these little sort of galettes. They looked like rosti, sort of, grated fried potato. And I sort of helped myself to a big, a couple of them, thinking, oh, these look yummy. Crunched into them. But as I got closer, I suddenly saw what it was. And it wasn't grated fried potato. It was like maggots. It was little insects.
I knew you were going to say some kind of worm or something.
Yeah, exactly. Some sort of wormy insect things, deep fried into a sort of little fritter. And obviously, I had taken a couple of bites actually before I noticed, and I had quite enjoyed it. And as soon as I saw what it was, I just, you just sort of want to heave. I was like, oh my God. And the host, our landlord, went out to the kitchen to get something or whatever. And I made sort of eye contact with my husband. It's like, have you seen what we're eating? He's like, no, tucking happily in. He said, take a look. And he did exactly this. And I was like, oh my God, because we didn't know. I have eaten some pretty horrible things that I've known about, but this one, we didn't know what we're eating. And it was just such a surprise. So we then had to do that whole mind over matter thing. Think, actually we were enjoying it before we saw what it was.
That's right.
Right.
So, forget that it's deep fried insects and worms or maggots or, larva of some sort.
I think you did a good job.
So that was one of the, the biggest sort of surprises, because, Vietnam was obviously the place where I've eaten probably the most peculiar things. I remember going on a work lunch with some colleagues, and they presented little whole sparrows, deep fried, and they were literally picking them up and crunching the head off. It is, the head of a little bird like that is just bone, and there's nothing there, and they were sort of crunching on them. And I'm very, very aware of culturally not offending and trying my best to eat everything, but that was one step too far. I could not pick up a deep fried sparrow and crunch through its skull. I couldn't do it. It's the only time I've said no to a particular food experience. I can't honestly remember what I said as an excuse. I don't think I could have suddenly been a vegetarian, because I'm sure I'd been eating other meat, but I couldn't do it. It was the one which was one step too far. I have eaten snake and dog, which I know you've had one of your recent podcasts was on rescuing dogs from the food trade. I tried it once in Hanoi as a sort of, again, a cultural thing with being taken by Vietnamese. I would never do it again. And it was also 25 years ago, even 20, nearly 30 years ago, when we were much less kind of aware of animal rights and things. But at least in all those cases, I knew what I was doing. And I managed it. But eating that bird, I couldn't do it. And eating the deep fried maggots made me heave because it was such a surprise. But
I can imagine.
In Vietnam,
but we've had some weird stuff too. Yeah, even in France, we had a petit oiseau pâté, and the thing about that was the little bird pâté was that you could take the bones were in there, so it was crunchy. And I mean, we ate it, and actually, it tasted just fine. But the fact that we were, like you said, crunching on bones, and we knew what they were because it's in the title. And this is before Google Translate, so we were pretty sure we knew exactly what it was. Anyway, so it was just. Yeah,
but sometimes the title is just a name, and it doesn't really necessarily mean that it's got like a baby bird whole skeleton in it.
Yeah.
Until you're like halfway through the small little pot and you're going for another scoop, and out comes
a claw.
Yeah.
Oh no!
And that was in France.
I know.
About 25 years ago, but
it does have some pretty horrible stuff. I mean, it has obviously some great stuff, but there's they do like a lot of innards and things which I can't be doing with. I remember another story where I was pretty surprised by what I ate, and again it turned my stomach, and it was a very surprising place. It was actually in Iceland. Well, Iceland, there's some foul stuff to eat.
Yes, there is.
But this was at the Chinese ambassador's house at a banquet that she gave to my family, because back then, I don't know if it's still the same for Chinese diplomats, but they weren't allowed to have their children in posting with them as a way of making, hopefully, that they would come back and wouldn't defect. And so she had children very much the same age as me and my brother and sister, the Chinese ambassador. So they invited us over for a big banquet to sort of have children with them. And I didn't know much about Chinese food at that stage. I was probably about 15 or 16. I mean, I'd had, Chinese takeaways in English towns, which were very sort of banal Chinese food, but I'd never had much more authentic, certainly not cooked by Chinese. And so there were all these yummy things. And then there was this huge pile of what I took to be sort of like noodles. And I thought, that's a given. That's going to be yummy. I'm going to have lots of that. So I helped myself to a big thing of these. Crunched into it, and they were crunchy, not soft as you'd expect noodles, in a sort of really kind of freaky way, and sort of what is this? And they were jellyfish tentacles.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never had jellyfish.
Never had those before or since.
Yeah.
But it certainly marked me as a food experience. But those are all sort of a bit freaky, creepy ones. I remember much more recently, and a really lovely sort of one of those serendipitous. How do you say that word?
Serendipitous.
No, that's not even tales. Where it was in Montenegro, and we booked an apartment which we were having trouble finding. So we turned up, but we pulled up in this car outside a house, and the man rushed out. He says, if you come to stay, and we were looking at our address, and we were like, I don't think it's here, sorry. And he sort of, we showed it, and he sort of pointed and sort of had this sort of smug look on his face and was like, yeah, okay. Off we went. We found the place we were staying. It was absolute disaster. I mean, there was a heat wave going on, and it had one window, honestly, about 20 centimeters high, and no aircon and no fan and nothing. There was no way we could stay. So we sort of said to them, really sorry. I mean, we're very hardy people. We can stay kind of anywhere, but here we couldn't stay there. And this heat was like 40 degrees Celsius. And we said, we're really sorry, we can't stay. And so we kind of walked back to this other place where this man had rushed out, and we were like, sheepishly, do you have anywhere to stay? And he's like, I knew you did that kind of thing. Anyway, so we went back, we stayed with this guy who had a lovely, lovely sort of not self-catering, just a big apartment. And he did meals, and we couldn't really communicate much. He had a little bit of Italian, and I have very little Italian, but more than I have of Montenegrin, which I don't suppose is
Whatever
a language, is it? But Serbian or whatever.
Right.
And so he made basically mangiare. Yes, we'd like to mangiare. And he just said carne or pesce. So it was like meat or fish. That's all we could decide. And we were on it was on a very pretty but really polluted river. And he was pointing, fish from there. And we were like, okay, I think we'll stick to meat in this case. And so we had this incredible feast of so much food. It just went on and on and on. And there was another young family staying there. I think he might have been German. I can't really remember. But anyway, they'd been traveling around Montenegro for about a month. And so they knew much more about kind of prices, and we'd only been there about 3 or 4 days, and they knew much more about what to expect. Anyway, so we had this, this fantastic meal that just kept coming, and all this wonderful home cooked food, and went on and on and on. And they said, at the end, would you like breakfast? And we were like, oh, yes, please. And in the morning, there was a pile of pancakes, honestly, like this high. So, a good foot high. It just kept going. It kept going. There was so much food. It was so delicious and all home cooked. And we still didn't know what the price of the room was, let alone the meals. We had no idea what we were paying. And so, we say to the man in the end, like, we need to pay you, how much is it? And he just says, oh, whatever you feel like, how much do you think it's worth?
Oh my gosh.
And we were just like, oh, this is awkward, because we have no idea how much we should appropriately pay.
Sure.
So, we chatted to this other family who'd been in the country for much longer, and they sort of gave us an indication of what they thought. And I seem to remember them saying something like $20 a head equivalent, 20 euros a head-ish,
Mm-hmm.
It was amazingly cheap for the food, the 2 meals, and a night in a house. And so we thought, well, we'll give it a little bit more. But, you're always aware of not overinflating. Like, you don't want to pay too much so that the next people, it becomes too expensive. But equally, you don't want to offend and pay too little. We absolutely. So I think we probably upped it to maybe 30. It was, such an incredible bargain. Such a lovely memory that we, we'll never forget those meals. The family they didn't really eat with us, but they kept coming and going and chatting a bit, because there really was very little language in common. But, you still do the whole sign language and smiling and the odd Italian word. But, this food was home cooked Montenegrin food. And we would have never had this experience if we'd stayed in that horrible little hovel that we'd booked. And also, if we hadn't pulled up in front of this guy who came rushing out and said, do you need a room and everything? It was just so lovely.
That's amazing. We have a very similar story.
Right. In Yugoslavia.
Yeah. In Yugoslavia, before it was not Yugoslavia anymore.
Yeah.
So we had planned this. We had planned this trip to Yugoslavia, another road trip, camping along the coast, down into the provinces of Slovenia and Croatia, and just having a really good time with our daughters. We had it all planned out. The news was kind of threatening about unrest and whatnot. But
stay away.
I had the leave time already planned, and we had it all set up. So, off we went, and we got to down to Italy, and we're staying in a campground, and the newspaper came out saying, this is really not a time to go here. There's tanks rolling around the border in Slovenia. And we thought, well, but it's still open. So we'll just go in for a day and see what's going on and make a decision. So we did that. We went in for the day, and we drove across.
But $50 worth of Yugoslavian drachma or whatever it was.
Right. I forget what they're called now.
What was it called? Yeah. Oh.
It wasn't
remember.
very. It had been. We didn't know this at the time, but it had been devalued 5 zeros. So it was just like a little couple of bills, and we're like,
and it had
really,
been
that's
recently
$50.
done. So when we did our exchange, we got like, I don't
A
know,
few bills, whatever.
90,000 or whatever it was. Or 9,000. It was 9,000.
Yeah.
9,000.
And in a couple of different bills. So we're like, okay, that's interesting. And we thought we had an idea what the exchange rate was, but this didn't really match what we thought. And anyway, get into the car. At the same border crossing, there were tanks and soldiers, and our daughters were out skipping around playing while we were dealing with all the paperwork.
As you do.
Yeah, exactly. But we got in the car and we headed in, and the first little town we came to, we went into a grocery store, because that's one of the things we like to do.
That's
is
what we do.
check out a very local grocery store and just see what kind of produce they have, and baked goods, and just what kind of things are on the shelves, and also get a chance to hopefully break one of these bills. So we picked out a few items, some different chocolate bars that we'd never seen before, and apples and bananas and things like that, and went to pay and had no idea what to do. So I just held out the bills that I had, because she counted it all up.
The cash register said 1,000, and we had 9,000. We're like, well, that's pretty expensive, but we know it's going to war. So, and we're there for the day. And, when we spend the money, we spend the money. We're not worried about it. So we hand her 1,000, and she has a literal heart attack. She freaks out because
Well, she meant like 1,000 of them.
The old one,
of the old money. So she goes then and they're collecting money from every cashier. They're trading money from the buyers. They're doing, and we end up with this stack of money that's like old.
So we ended up with a whole stack of the old bills.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh,
we have no idea.
Like,
we thought we were pretty good at exchanges, but
yeah.
Oh.
So what, like I said, one of the reasons we went in was to get an idea of, how it's going to work.
Prices.
We left even more clueless. So off we go down the road. We did a little bit of sightseeing. I forget which city this was. Was it Trieste, maybe?
I don't know. It started with an R.
Yeah, okay. So it's somewhere up in that the northwest corner of Slovenia. And eventually we found an open restaurant, because most things were closed, that was perched up on a cliff above the ocean. It was just a really kind of a cool place.
View.
Nothing like fancy, but just a really great location. And they had the grill out in the front, and it looked like it'd be some pretty good food. So we go in, and there's only 2 or 3 men, and they're sitting down at a table smoking and drinking and listening to this blaring radio that's giving obviously political speeches nonstop.
The only thing we can hear is democracy, democracy, democracy.
we're like, okay, yeah, that sounds a little bit,
incisive. Yeah.
So we almost left. Yeah, we almost left, but we hadn't seen anything else, and we were getting hungry, and they didn't chase us out or anything. So we sat down at a table, and one of the guys that was sitting down stood up and came over and asked, obviously, what we wanted, and didn't offer a menu. Didn't speak
No, I think we
English.
saw a menu. We just didn't understand.
Oh yeah,
So
but it wasn't. Yeah, that's right. Didn't speak English. We were like, we've got money. We showed him our money. We said, we just want to have a good meal.
He spoke Italian, which I can't speak, and I spoke German to him, and that's how we communicated. But other than lots of hand signals and throwing our hand up and saying whatever.
But once he saw the money we had, he said, no worries, no problem. I will bring you a feast. And he did. He proceeded to bring out, every type of grilled, barbecued meat that they had, potatoes, French fries.
Yeah, that sounds like that meal I had, exactly. Just unbelievable.
And it just kept coming and coming and coming.
Exactly.
So then we thought, okay, well, this is our $50, right? The rest of our $50, no big deal. We were we're only there for the
It was
day.
only $50.
So-
Even if the whole meal costs that, that's not a
Yeah.
problem.
But it wasn't, because it comes time to pay. We're finally ready to leave. Probably 2 hours later, we're having such a good time with this man and everything. We basically hold out this pile of money, like, just take what you want. You can have it all. We really just don't care. Just take what you want. And he picks through.
Takes a couple of bills.
I couldn't even tell you how much he took. We still
And
had
he's still
this
left with a
pile
pile.
of money. Yes. Oh, it was just amazing. It was.
So the
like you
second
said,
half
it's
of
a
that day,
memory.
yeah, the second half of that day turned into trying to spend all this money and get it out before we had to go across the border again. We ended up buying a couple of T-shirts. Oh, we stopped at this one guy who was selling T-shirts like out of the side of his van or something, and he had a bunch of like
We tried.
rock bands and things like this, and we said, if we're going to buy a T-shirt, how about like a Yugoslavia T-shirt? He says,
Sure.
Yugoslavia, no. He did have a Slovenia shirt. So we're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, Slovenia, that's better. That's so much better. So we
Sure.
bought a couple of
So
T-shirts.
that must be one of the earliest Slovenia T-shirts.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think we
Right.
still have it, unfortunately. I mean, it was that many years ago, of
It was
course.
so long ago.
As
yeah.
it turns out, long story short, I mean, this day was just an amazing day. But
Long story short, they closed the borders at midnight. No tourists, nobody left the country for the next 2 weeks. It was
Oh wow!
that close to the
So
start
you
of
really,
the war.
yeah. You just
Yeah, I
made
mean,
it.
So
And we just basically, that's why we knew we couldn't stay. We just gave up on our, our Dubrovnik plans and all that because we weren't going to stay.
Oh.
But yeah, it was close.
we still have that pile of
Oh no!
Yugoslavian bills
We
somewhere.
do.
Well, that's a good souvenir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I realized, talking about currency devaluing, I completely forgot that in my listing off where I've lived, I lived in Bulgaria as well. Oops, that just seems
oh wow,
Oh, cool.
in between Australia and Vietnam. I actually lived there for 6 months, but I'd been going regularly to visit my parents who were posted there for the few years before. And that the currency devaluation really reminded me of that, because my parents were there from 89 to 94-ish, and they arrived. It was still
Right over there.
it was still closed. It was
Yeah.
pre-revolution. And then they were there for the revolution, and then they were there for the beginning of democracy. And at the beginning, the currency went down so madly like that people were left with piles of money. There was just crazily nothing available, so cheap for us Westerners, just ridiculously cheap. I remember one particular story. A big I think it's an Austrian make of skis, Atomic ski make. They had a factory in Bulgaria, and they were making skis. And when the devaluation happened, the top of their range skis were you could buy them in Sofia for about 10 euros.
Wow.
Which would have been hundreds elsewhere. And my brother was at the time a manic skier. I mean, he was a ski instructor, and he was completely crazy about skis. He just bought up so many pairs of amazing skis because they were just the currency went crazy. Anyway, that's a bit of a slightly naughty story, but it was those days of early democracy days in Eastern Europe were amazing times. We were up during the revolution in Bulgaria, climbing up on statues in the big squares, kind of like you said, democracy and
Yeah.
and that was all. I mean, it's scary to think that it's now historic. It feels
I know.
very recent, but that shows how old we are. That it's now. I suppose it's now as long ago, almost. No, I was going to say as the Second World War was when I was studying that as a school, but no, it's not quite as long ago as that. But
Not
it's
quite. It's getting close.
It's now what 30
years.
more than 30 years ago. So fascinating times.
Really fascinating.
Trying to think if I have
I love that we lived
any
through
food
it.
stories. Oh, amazing
Well,
times.
I
to live
just
through.
love food.
It's like,
what can I say?
like when I was in Hanoi, I mean, there were no Americans. You guys were not allowed in. There was, it was the American, as they called it, the American embargo was still on. and there were no Americans. The only Americans that came were a few military missions came looking for MIAs. Those were the only Americans in the city. Like I say, it was so closed, and we had to have passes to leave Hanoi city limits, and fascinating historical times to be there. I was there when the American embargo lifted, and a few tentative Americans came in, crazy to think that there was obviously no American embassy, nothing, now. Just young American backpackers or whatever couldn't even imagine that they weren't allowed into this country.
Allowed in,
and I'm not that old. I know
we keep telling ourselves that.
I'm not prehistoric. I'm not Victorian. It was crazy times, amazing times to be in these places.
Mm-hmm.
So much fun.
I know. I have actually just thought of another food story, and I think you've been there too. Mongolia.
I'll tell you what, it's got good food stories.
I was there in 94, again, very few tourists. And my friend and I we didn't know how long we were going to be there. I think we had a visa for 2 weeks, which was as long as you could get then. And we were wandering around the center of Ulaanbaatar, and we bumped into a young English guy who was trying to set up a travel agent. And he was like the first Western travel agent trying to set up there. And he was going off to do a recce for to see if it would be feasible to take tours on a sort of camel trek, staying in yurts and things. And he said, come along. You can come with me, just as long as you pay your airfare to get to Hovd, which was in the far west of Mongolia, just come along for free. So we did. The flight there to Hovd was a whole other story. I mean, it involved driving cross country on a plane across a field, landing in a whole different. They announced we were going via south, and we went via north. It was just crazy. But basically, we ended up staying with locals in their yurts, or gers, aren't they? They're called there. They're not called yurts. Mm-hmm. And being fed by them for 4 days, which was absolutely lovely, amazing experience. But really, I think the most foul food that ever existed. We ate for 4 days off fermented mare's milk curds. I mean,
well, we even had camel curds
salted tea.
And salted tea.
And how you can have salt in your drink. And that was like 4 days of that.
Because when they're very established. So what they do now, but the thing is, no one really told us to do this. We didn't understand how important it was. So we set up a tour in Mongolia where they drive you in those old Russian vans around the country to wherever we picked, and it was wonderful, and it was cheap, and it was great, and we were staying in Gers, and everything was great. So on the way out of Ulaanbaatar, we stopped at a grocery store. Well, we're like, well, that's nice. We love going to grocery stores, as we mentioned, but we bought. Gosh, I don't even know. We didn't buy much of anything because we were going to be fed, so we didn't think that we needed food. But the whole idea is they were so used to people not eating the food that if you bought more, you would have something else to eat along the way, right? Well, we didn't know this. No one verbalized that to us. It wasn't in any of the literature. We just didn't know. So none of us on my trip, we had taken 6 people because that's what fills up the van. So Jim and I had collected 4 of our friends to go with us so that, we were just us. And one couple we've traveled to over 25 countries with. So they're quite intrepid people like we are. The other couple, we didn't know that much, but they were fun. Anyway, They survived. Anyway, we get out to these Gers and they fed us, like you said, food. I guess.
Food-ish.
Food-ish kind of stuff. And we were kind of hungry the whole time we were out there. So we started to, every time we would go by a town, we tell our driver, whose name I'm sure was not Jack, but that's what we called him. Jack, stop. We need to eat. Go find us a restaurant. So he finally understood that if he was going to go to a town, we were going to make him take us to some place to eat. So we went into some, like, we had horseshoe that way. We had different Mongolian
Shepherd's pie.
foods that way.
Well, you make it sound like we drove through towns constantly.
No, we
Like,
didn't.
But there aren't any.
There
In
aren't
the
any
eight-
towns.
In the 8 days, I think we saw 3 towns. And each time we said, oh, we are going to stop at a restaurant.
We're going to eat.
As
And we were
much as
kinda
you can call it a restaurant. So something besides what we were getting in the GERS.
Well, certainly
from the
there were
families.
no restaurants where we were in the west of
I'm
Mongolia,
sure.
near Hov. We did. I think we went to a couple in Ulaanbaatar, but really, I mean, I have memories of a sort of vaguely a pizza place, and that was the only restaurant that we could find. Again, it was just way before tourism started there, so it's not somewhere I've been back.
Yeah, the opposite of that is, though, we were in Ulaanbaatar. We couldn't find anything authentic. Like, we had a really hard time finding anything that wasn't an Irish pub or
It was all for expats.
Yeah.
It was all for tourists, and that's we could not convey. And when we're I mean, we've done this many times. You'd think we could, but we had such a difficult time trying to explain to them, no, we don't want that food. That's not what we're looking for. We want something more, Mongolian. But I think that there's just not that many Mongolian restaurants, period. I mean, I think the restaurants
it's not really part of their culture.
Yeah, it's not a foodie country.
No, it is not. Don't go there for the food.
it's eat to survive, not to enjoy. Yeah,
but it was fascinating. We had a wonderful time.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.